We will start with the remarks. First up will be Joanne Thompson, and then Kody Blois. Then we will end with Steven Guilbeault, ministre de l'Environnement. Ensuite, on va avoir, on me dit 1 heure pour les questions. Alors, ça devrait être amplement de temps. Alors, Madame Thompson. You're up.
Hello, good afternoon, bonjour. Thank you to everyone for coming to today's press conference. My name is Joanne Thompson, and I am the Member of Parliament for St. John's East. And I am thrilled to be here today for such an important announcement for Newfoundland and Labrador and for the provinces in Atlantic Canada. I will be your MC this afternoon. I would like to begin by acknowledging that we are gathered on the unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. We've had an emotional and moving day of tributes to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth. And as a caucus, we have just wrapped up 2 days of our caucus meetings, where the focus was squarely on bread and butter issues of affordability for Canadian families. And so I appreciate that this is a busy time for everyone. And that means that it is all the more important to help Canadians look after their bottom line. And now I'm very happy to invite my colleague, Kody Blois, the Member of Parliament for King's Hants, to say a few words. Kody.
Thank you very much, Joanne. Thank you, Minister Guilbeault, for what you're going to be announcing today, and indeed to my Atlantic colleagues, and P.S. Julie DeBruzen as well. I know you're not in Atlantic Caucus, but we certainly appreciate all your tremendous work on behalf of Canadians in Parliament. As was mentioned, my name is Kody Blois. I'm the Member of Parliament for King's Hants and the proud chair of the Atlantic Liberal Caucus. I'll be providing my remarks today in both English and in French. Comment l'a mentionné, je m'appelle Kody Blois. Je suis le député de King's Hants et le président du Caucus libéral de l'Atlantique. Je ferai mes remarques cet après-midi en anglais et français. Today, I'm here to be able to give context of why this announcement is going to be so important across the country, but particularly in Atlantic Canada. Aujourd'hui, je suis ici pour expliquer pourquoi cette annonce est tellement importante, bien sûr dans tout le pays, mais particulièrement dans le Canada Atlantique. Approximately 50% of the households in Atlantic Canada still use home heating oil to fuel their homes. It's worth noting that we also have a large percentage of houses and buildings that are older and energy inefficient. Environ 50% des domiciles du Canada Atlantique utilisent encore le mazout pour chauffer leur maison. Il convient de noter que nous avons également un grand pourcentage des maisons et des bâtiments qui sont vieux et inefficaces de la consommation d'énergie. And we've seen the volatility of energy prices on the global market since the onset of COVID-19, but particularly since the outbreak of the war in Ukraine by Russia's unprovoked invasion. This has had a direct impact on affordability, and I've had conversations, and indeed I know my colleagues across the Atlantic Caucus have had conversations with their constituents about the challenges they're facing with the cost of living. There are many families across the country who have already made a transition. They've invested in a heat pump or made their homes more energy efficient. However, we know that there are some families that simply do not have the means in order to be able to do so. And I want to give you an example. King's Hants is a rural riding about 40 minutes outside of Halifax. And there is a particular constituent of mine named Doris. She's a widowed senior living in a house built during the golden age of sale. And for those that may not know, that was in the 1800s on the Hants shore. Small rural community. And she is a recipient of the Guaranteed Income Supplement and frankly does not have the ability to pay up front to make the improvements to reduce her energy bill. The announcement that Minister Guilbeault is going to speak about today is directed towards people like Doris, who we need to make sure there's funds in place to be able to make that transition. Notre gouvernement a été élu sur un plan de réduction des émissions afin de respecter nos engagements internationaux dans le cadre de COP. Dans King's Hants, nous avons le marais plus haut du monde, ce qui nous rappelle constamment l'importance de faire notre part collective dans la lutte contre le changement climatique. Today's announcement is important because it is increasing the number of projects that can be supported through provincial energy efficiency programs, thereby reducing emissions. But in our view, this is not just about projects. This is about making a difference in people's lives by reducing energy bills and supporting affordability for Canadians who really need that support. Ces investissements peuvent aider à économiser des milliards de dollars sur le coût de l'énergie et, avec les programmes fédéraux existants, dans certains cas, les personnes plus vulnérables peuvent avoir accès à 100% des fonds nécessaires pour réaliser ces projets. C'est ce sur quoi nous nous sommes concentrés plus tôt cette semaine lors de la retraite de notre caucus au Nouveau-Brunswick et c'est ce sur quoi le gouvernement reste concentré pour l'avenir. I want to thank all the ministers that were involved, obviously Minister Guilbeault first and foremost for his leadership in this particular aspect. But I also want to especially thank our Atlantic Caucus colleagues. Now, yes, today I'm delivering on behalf of Atlantic colleagues, but I can say that inside our caucus, this has been a priority, that we had a program in place to help support vulnerable households to be able to make that energy transition in the light of what we're seeing around the world with global prices that are impacting affordability. So to my colleagues that are here, and indeed some that couldn't make it, well done, and thank you for your advocacy. Again, this is great news for Canada, particularly in Atlantic Canada. Thank you.
Thank you, Kody. And it is now my pleasure to invite the Honourable Steven Guilbeault, Minister of Environment and Climate Change, to deliver today's important news. Minister.
Merci. Bonjour, chers collègues. Bonjour à toutes et à tous. C'est un plaisir d'être parmi vous pour cette annonce. Permettez-moi également de reconnaître que nous sommes réunis sur le territoire non cédé du peuple algonquin-anishinaabe. La reconnaissance du territoire est un acte de réconciliation avec les peuples autochtones. Témoigne également de notre respect et de notre gratitude à l'égard du territoire que nous partageons. I would also like to express my sadness and admiration for Her Royal Highness, Queen Elizabeth II, whose passing reminds us all of the most powerful symbol of public service. She was Canada's monarch for 70 years, almost half of the life of the Confederation, and never wavered in her lifelong commitment to duty. All of us in public life can find something to admire in her example. All of us hope to leave our country, our region, our community a better place. That's why we got involved, at least it should be. And that's what today's all about. Atlantic Canadians, like coastal communities everywhere, have storied tradition of dealing with the elements, tough, resilient, and hardworking. But climate change is a storm we can't just ride out. It has become a clear and present danger. We're seeing it in our communities and across the world in the ever more frequent and extreme weather events. The question is now, what are we about to do about climate change going forward? How are we going to prepare to keep our communities safe? How do we stop making the problem worse and start reversing the damage? How do we ensure affordability and reliability of energy supplies as we deal with climate hazards? Since 2015, our government has consistently pursued the most ambitious climate action of any government in Canada's history. More than $100 billion have been invested to date. Putting a price on pollution and returning the revenues to households has been and will continue to be central to our efforts to change climate course. It's working. Si ça fonctionne, c'est parce que nous attribuons un coût à ce que nous ne voulons pas, la pollution, et nous ajoutons une valeur à ce que nous voulons, de l'air pur, des énergies propres, fiables et abordables, ainsi que des emplois durables. Là où les provinces ont choisi d'utiliser le système fédéral plutôt que leur propre modèle de tarification de la pollution, 8 ménages sur 10 reçoivent plus d'argent qu'ils n'en déboursent pour leur consommation en énergie fossile. That works out to hundreds of dollars each year that gets delivered to families through their quarterly climate action incentive checks. This is a system that makes life more affordable for regular people and fight climate change. And that's something our government will always stand up for. Recently, the 4 Atlantic premiers raised an interesting and compelling public policy matter that is of particular concern to their region when it comes to affordability and fighting climate change, as have my colleagues from Atlantic Canada today. This region has one of the highest proportion of homes heated with oil furnaces in the country, and many of those are older homes with modest income, as Kody has just outlined. These are households that would love to get off the roller coaster of global oil and gas price fluctuations, but have too few options. They want reliable, affordable home heating, and their premiers were right to go for bat for them, as are my colleagues here today. Voilà pourquoi je suis heureux d'annoncer aujourd'hui un investissement qui pourrait atteindre 250 millions de dollars pour la création d'un nouveau programme visant à aider les ménages canadiens à abandonner le mazout comme combustible pour le chauffage domestique. Compte tenu de la situation spécifique du Canada atlantique, où historiquement le mazout était le moyen simple pour chauffer les bâtiments, environ 120 millions de dollars de cet investissement seront réservés pour Terre-Neuve-Labrador, le Nouveau-Brunswick, la Nouvelle-Écosse et l'île du Prince-Édouard. Atlantic Canadians, just like people across the country, deserve to be able to heat their homes with affordable, reliable, and clean power. So just like I committed to my Atlantic colleagues, today our government is taking an important step to help make that happen. So I am very happy to announce a new program of up to $250 million to help Canadian households move off home heating oil and onto affordable green options like electric heat pumps. And in recognition of the reality of Atlantic Canada's built environment, where using oil to heat homes is much more common, approximately 120 million of the total is earmarked for Newfoundland and Labrador, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, and Prince Edward Island. Federal funds will be made available through the Low Carbon Economy Leadership Fund to provincially administered home heating transition programs. This new funding can be stacked with other federal and provincial incentives, like the Canada Greener Homes Grant, so that up to 100% of the cost of a new heat pump may be covered for low-income households. Cette première étape sera suivie de d'autres mesures visant des solutions pour que tous et toutes au Canada puissent avoir accès à de l'énergie propre, durable et abordable. Nous nous sommes engagés à aider les Canadiens et Canadiennes de l'Atlantique à régler leurs factures d'énergie coûteuses. En investissant 250 millions de dollars, nous tenons cette promesse et en plus, nous promettons aux gens d'économiser des milliers de dollars par année tout en combattant les changements climatiques. Bien que ce nouveau financement réponde aux préoccupations spécifiques de mes collègues de l'Atlantique ainsi que des premiers ministres de cette région concernant les coûts du chauffage des maisons, je tiens à dire qu'il ne s'agit que de l'une des nombreuses mesures que notre gouvernement met en place pour rendre abordable la consommation des biens essentiels à la population canadienne en cette période d'inflation mondiale. As the Prime Minister announced, we're doubling GST payments to lower-income Canadians for 6 months, boosting the low-income rent support program and helping parents pay for their kids' dental costs in modest-income families. Nous savons également que ces programmes de transition du chauffage résidentiel sont extrêmement populaires et que cette transition nécessitera un effort soutenu. Voilà pourquoi la totalité de cet investissement de 250 millions de dollars s'échelonne sur une période de 4 ans. Ainsi, cela permettra la création de nouveaux emplois dans les secteurs de l'énergie propre partout au Canada et l'établissement d'une chaîne d'approvisionnement dynamique au Canada atlantique. Des maisons confortables et chauffées à l'aide d'une source d'énergie fiable, abordable et favorisant de bons emplois locaux. Voilà notre objectif. Too often, we see conservative politicians tell us to change course, stop trying, to delay action, or to pretend that climate change doesn't even exist. They suggest you can fight global inflation by polluting more right here at home. And they're proposing to kick the problem down the road for someone else to clean up. That will never be our approach. We're focused on affordability, we're focused on climate change, and we're focused on addressing them together. By putting a price on pollution and helping households make the switch to cleaner, cheaper, reliable home heating right now, our government is making a positive and sustainable contribution instead of living in fear or denial. A world of reliable, clean, and affordable energy produced at home and supported by a vibrant, clean energy supply chain and good-paying, sustainable jobs. That's a win for Atlantic Canadians, a win for our environment. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Minister. This wraps up the formal portion of this announcement, and the Minister is now happy to take your questions.
Yeah, so we will now go to questions. So I'll just ask the reporters on the line just to lift your virtual hand if you have a question. First up, Ross Lord. I think you are muted, Ross.
Oh, good. Okay. So you didn't hear me say, I hope everyone can hear me.
Yep.
Minister Guilbeault, how does the reopening of the Donkin underground coal mine in Cape Breton fit or maybe contradict your government's plan to move away from fossil fuels?
As you know, we've made a commitment to eliminate the use of coal in Canada by 2030. We're well on our way to do that. And I would invite you to go back to the emissions reduction plan that we published last March, which shows that by far the electricity sector in Canada is the sector that has reduced its emission the fastest of any other sector. So we still have some work to do, but our work to tackle pollution in the electricity sector is going very well.
I see that, but what does that have to do with reopening Donkin?
Well, I mean, frankly, you should ask the province that question. As you know, the federal government doesn't tell provinces which source of energy they should use or not. We're tackling pollution, and that's exactly what we're doing with today's announcement by helping tens of thousands of people get off home heating oil in the coming years and go for more affordable and cleaner options to heat their homes.
Brian Flynn.
I got muted again. Sorry. Final question for you, sir. Environmentalists say that Donkin coal produces more greenhouse gas emissions than coal used for electricity. Apparently, the Donkin coal is used for steel making. So why is that coal not included in your emissions regulations? It seems as though there may be a loophole there.
No, there's no loophole. So there obviously the emissions that are emitted by any industrial actors in Canada are taken into account both in the national inventories and are also part of the system, the pricing system that we've put in place. Obviously, in terms of pricing, we will have news to communicate. We are in discussion with provinces and territories on an updated, more stringent system starting in 2023, but the emissions captured by industrial emitters will be tackled under the system.
Thank you.
Brian Flynn.
Yes, Minister Guilbeault, your program is expected to run over 4 years. I'm wondering, in the meantime, is there going to be any provision in carbon pricing to help low-income Canadians who are heating with heating oil? Is there any provision to help them with carbon prices?
So, two things to say about that. First one, as I said, and as you might have noted in my remarks, in provinces where the federal system is being applied, 8 out of 10 households receive more money from the federal government than what it's costing them in terms of consumption of fossil fuels. Number one. Number two, there's a 10% increase on that amount for rural Canadians because we recognize that in rural areas, sometimes you have less options than people in urban areas would have. So we've already taken that into consideration.
Follow up.
I was wondering if I could ask a follow-up question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Minister, I was wondering, the provinces submitted their proposals for carbon pricing almost 2 weeks ago. When are you going to be responding to that? And in particular, I'm curious about Nova Scotia because Nova Scotia submitted a plan that didn't include a carbon price, as I'm sure you're aware.
So we're in the process of finalizing the analysis of the submissions we've received from provinces. Some provinces have decided to update their submission. So I would estimate it will take Environment and Climate Change Canada team another couple of weeks probably to be able to make a final determination in terms of these systems. So, you know, October, I would imagine, maybe November, we will be in a position to announce what will be put in place for 2023. So we have a bit of time ahead of us. The new systems must be in place by January 1st of next year. So we have a bit of time ahead of us, but we don't want to take too much time either.
We still have some time for questions. If there's other reporters on the line that would want to have a question, just raise your hand. Il ne semble pas y avoir d'autres questions, alors c'est ce qui met fin à la conférence de presse.